All right. Well, welcome everybody to MVP Office Hours, the first one of 2019. Happy New Year to everyone out there. My name is Jared Kingston. I'm one of the hosts of MVP Office Hours. I am helped out by Jackie Trevieso and Dale Ziegler, who unfortunately aren't able to join us today. Certainly wish them well and appreciate their help with the office hours. We like to kick off every office hours with a little update on upcoming events and what's going on in the community. So, certainly want to point you out to all the events that Salesforce is putting on. You can see the URLs there for those different events. We also have a lot of community-led events coming up, some existing, some new to the ecosystem. So definitely check those out there. We got one coming up here next week, looks like, in a couple weeks in Phoenix, which, man, that'd be nice to get out to. Nice warm up and several others coming up, all, as you can see, all over the world, really. So check those out. And if we move forward here, just a little kind of refresh on this as we move into 2019, just to give a level set, on what MVP Office Hours is, right? We're all here to help each other out. And so, share your experience, input, recommendations, what you've run across. It doesn't matter if you're an MVP or not. We're here to, try to crowdsource questions and help people out. Because this is an open webinar call, we just ask you mute your lines so that we can easily hear the questions and the answers as people are speaking. If you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand in the chat, or if we're asking for people to speak up, just simply unmute yourself and speak up. It's always helpful if you announce yourself. Certainly we can see your name pop in there, but announce yourself as we ask and answer things. And then if you have any resources that are helpful that you've run across, whether they're blogs or help articles, post those in the chat. I'll be recording those in the call in this slide deck, and then we'll post that out later. And then lastly, you can share your screen. So if we get to it, right, we need to jump into your org and you're comfortable with it, we can give you the controls and allow you to share what's going on, and we'll try to help you through it. And then lastly, before we get started here, just to, again, a reminder, we have a site, mvpofficehours.info. Gives you all the information on all the MVP Office Hours groups. So this is the US-based one. We have one in EMEA. We have a Portuguese-led one. And several others. So definitely go out to the site. You can get all the information. You can bookmark the registration link. You can subscribe to our email list, so you can just get an email every time before a new session, so you can register. And you can, again, see all the information you need to there on MVP Office Hours. With that being said, let's go ahead, and I'm going to open up the chat here. I know that Jennifer, okay, my chat is, give me a second. Jennifer, you had a question already teed up there. So you want to go ahead and roll with it, and then if we need to, we can jump into your org.
Sure. My name's Jennifer. I'm at a little charity in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am having some challenges with Process Builder. What I want to do is, I have a survey that feeds and creates a new record every time somebody takes the survey, and it will stamp the record with the ID of the person, the contact who's filling out the survey. I need that to become a clickable link, and I'm told I can do it in Process Builder.
I can help with that. This is Pete.
Hi, Pete.
Go for it, Pete.
Okay, so if you need it to be a clickable link, then what we actually need is we need to be populating a lookup field
Yes.
So you should now, $user should be accessible. If it's not, now you're saying we want it to be populated with the ID of the currently logged in user?
No. I want it to be populated with the contact of the person who filled out the form. So it's a random contact in my database, not a user.
Okay. So how do we identify the contact that is in question? Is this the record that's triggered the process, or is it the survey?
It's the survey that triggered the process. And the survey will capture, every record has the unique URL. It'll capture the person's letters and numbers, but it won't capture the HTTPS NA38 Salesforce.com part.
Okay, but it does capture for a contact 003 and the 18-character ID?
Yes. Yep. How do I turn that into a contact ID, a full, complete contact ID?
Okay. We should be able to do that with Process Builder. Are you comfortable with logging into your org and screen sharing?
Yes, my screen is up and I'm ready to share.
All right, let me stop my share here.
And Jennifer, this is Pat. Just a quick question. Where are you, when you're in Process Builder, where do you want that hyperlink saved? Where is it going?
I'm not real picky, but maybe to the record that, so here's my record. Can you see my Drive record?
Yep.
Okay, and down here, I get a volunteer ID who submitted the form. I want to turn that into a contact.
Oh,
Okay, and that contact field's a lookup?
Yes, that contact field is a lookup.
Okay, can you open
And
up the
I have
Process
a
Builder?
process builder started.
You should just be able to, yeah, you should go to immediate actions and hit the plus. And it should be update a record. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing it in the wrong spot because you're creating, so you're adding the contact info. Are you creating the record in the second scheduled action section where it says add contact info to ... Or is this where does the drive record get created?
It gets created an hour after the survey comes in. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Wait a sec. The Drive record gets created as soon as they fill out the survey.
Okay, so the process builder is actually firing on the drive record. So we do have that contact. So yeah, you should be able to go onto the immediate actions.
Okay.
And then where it says record type, you want to click in there and select the drive record that started the process, click choose. And then under field, click in there and select contact. And we want to select field reference.
So here I'm just getting Drive.
And yeah, now grab the field that's recording the ID.
Is it that one?
No, that's the created by user's current ID.
Okay, so that's my next problem.
Click back on Drive to the left there. Okay, and then you had that field, it was like VO something, I believe.
Yeah, it was like volunteer who created the form.
Okay.
See, it's not an ID, not, this field right here is not an ID field.
Yeah,
it's a random text field.
Then we should actually, I think we might be able to pull that via a formula. How is that field getting populated?
In my managed package, they gave me a form tool, and the form tool will automatically stamp it with whoever signed in their unique ID.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you try going back to the process builder and putting in formula and pulling down that field? That might work.
yeah. What?
You should be able to, go ahead.
But I was wondering, what is the API name of that field? Because it wasn't showing up in that list. See, the label is vol ID, but
I believe that that's a field integrity check where it's only going to let you populate a lookup field with an ID field and not the value in a text field.
I think you're right.
Yep. That would make sense.
Yeah, but what's the API name of that field?
Here it is.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, why didn't we see that when you're in the lookup fields there?
Because we were looking
Because
for
it's not a
an ID.
lookup.
I'm
So
sorry.
if
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's saying you're trying to populate a lookup. Well, here's a list of lookup fields. If this does not work via Process Builder, so what I would say is try to populate it with the value of that formula. If this does not work, what you instead want to do is have it launch a headless flow. In the flow, you say, and then you take that VOI, the contact ID, and you pass that into the flow as a starting parameter along with the ID of the drive record that you're working with in the Process Builder. You pass that to a flow, and then you say, go find me the contact whose ID equals this value. And then you grab its ID field, and then you would use a record update element to say, take that drive record and populate the contact lookup with the ID of the contact that I just queried.
Wow, Pete, you are light years ahead of me.
Yeah, but you're out on the formula field. Try typing into that field the VOL. There you go.
This might work. I hope it does, because this is the easy way. So you got to click use this formula.
And save.
And then save. Activate it and give it a shot. And if that doesn't work, if you want to just ping me your email, that I'll send you the instructions that I just gave you.
Okay, and why don't you guys go back and help somebody else, and I will run a test on this.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Nice work. Awesome. Let me reshare here. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your patience here. I know, Marty, you did have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Hi, quick question.
Yeah.
Partner communities, and I want to turn off chatter for the partner community users. And when I've looked, and it talks about being able to do it for the profile, but the option is not in the partner community user profile.
When you say you want to turn off chatter, are you saying you don't want them to see it at all, or you want them to be able to?
Correct. We don't want them to, at this point, use it at all. But they do use it internally. So I don't want to totally turn it off.
Yeah, that's totally easy. So, I mean, honestly, the easiest way to really do that is to really remove the components from the community pages. And you can do that on like record pages, for example. You'll want to create a different page layout, which I recommend that anyways.
So I did that, and it still appears on the side.
Yeah. So what you have to do is in the community, and I just had one up. In the community, the default record component for communities has chatter built in. So what you have to do is remove that component, and then there is a simple component called record detail that will allow you to actually bring that in. So I'm just opening my community up as well. That will allow you, so if you remove the default component, which blanking on the exact name of it right now, I'm getting in there, that will allow you to do that. So if you search record in the components list, there's a
So we're seeing the PowerPoint slide?
sorry, here, I'll
okay.
bring. Yeah, I was just describing it. Sorry. Yeah, there's a component. If I go to, let me go to. So yeah, here I'll just show you. I'll just bring it on my screen real quick. So you can see here, right? Like this is a default record detail page, and it
Right.
brings in this record information tabs component,
Yeah.
right? So what you want to do,
Oh,
if you want to remove the chatter
yes.
piece, right? Now you could certainly come in here and remove the tab of feed and just say none, and that will remove it, but it leaves this blank space over here. So what I do is I just remove the whole component, and then you can actually type in record here under components and then just bring in just the detail.
Okay.
Or you can, you could certainly, if you are showing them related lists, then, and you like this, kind of tabbed
Right.
layout here, then what I do there is I just use the tab component, put that in, and then in each tab have one for detail and one for the related lists.
Great. I'll try that.
Yeah, so that will remove it, and that's really the easiest way, because otherwise they won't have really access to view those
Perfect.
pieces.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Who else has a question? I do want to call out John. I see you're on the call, John Martinez. You emailed me, a question. I think this is a great one. Several questions for MVP office hours. I'll go ahead and read them off the email, and then if you want to add anything to it. John is on the 14th stepping into his first admin only role. So his questions are, he has a couple questions here as he starts this. What are the first steps to take when walking into an org? Any advice or any things or advice he should be aware of, and pieces he should investigate first. Sounds like you guys had someone else who implemented the org on Lightning, but maybe wasn't familiar with Salesforce, and so could be some potential issues there. Anything else you want to add there, John? I'll unmute you there. All right. Well, does anybody want to jump in there with their thoughts on, what to do as far as when they get into a new org? Anybody who's done that recently or has any input?
Well, as a consultant, whenever I go to a new org for the first time, I immediately start digging around and looking at stuff that, is there. I do kind of a health check where I'll look at process builders, workflows, flows, because I'm not really an Apex guy. And I'll try to get my head wrapped around what are the existing automations that are in place, what has been deprecated, do I see room to make anything more efficient? I'll usually do knowledge transfer with the business users to try and understand, this is what I Salesforce for, this is how I Salesforce, these are my pain points, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. If you're not a consultant, it's probably best to not immediately jump in and be like, oh, well, we should totally change everything because maybe it exists the way it does for a reason. But I would say it's, kind of like, starting a new cooking job. Figure out where to keep the pizza sauce, oh, this faucet, the hot water's backwards. This is where the dirty towels go when you're done at the end of your shift, that kind of stuff. Find a mentor who's, if available, somebody who's been in the org for longer, and stick to them like glue for at least a couple of weeks and figure out the cadence and the marching orders of how everybody does the things there before you start trying to, table flip everything. But I've never walked into an org that was perfect. I've never built an org that was perfect. So there's definitely going to be room for improvement.
This is Stuart. I would totally agree with what Pete said. when I first started at this org, I actually didn't even look at the technology first at all. There's always time to dive into the Salesforce org. I started out with talking to the leaders and the department managers and asking if they wanted to have a cup of coffee. So I had a lot of coffee with a lot of different managers and talked about what are you doing as a business? What are your goals? What are you using Salesforce for? Tell me about what your department does, what your business goals are, and made a lot of relationships there. And then when I talked to the Salesforce team and the IT team, I asked them, how do you do backlog? Where's your current backlog? What are you having problems with? What's going well? Because looking at their backlog and seeing where their problems are will tell you a lot about where their struggles are. And then dive into the Salesforce org. Put up a sandbox if you can, and look at Schema Builder. See what their schema is. Have they built a lot of objects, custom fields? Have they been playing around with Process Builder and flows? Have they built a lot of triggers, and have they installed managed packages? What have they got from the App Exchange? Things like that. How many, what's the scope of their users? How many users? How many profiles? Start to do a whole inventory of their Salesforce org. But I always start with the users first. I always start with the business. What is the business doing? What are the users doing? And then what's their process as far as how do they support their users, and what's their ticketing system? What's their backlog? How do they do their work? I think how you do work is way more important than what you do. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'd echo all of those, right? I think, again, a lot of it's, for me, every time I've stepped into a new org, it's really just taking an inventory, right, of those heavy hitters, automation being one of them, right? Whether that's declarative or code and what it's doing, and trying to understand that. And then talking with the super users, right, and other people who've been in the org is certainly great. Those are awesome.
One of the first things I'll usually do is just an export of the schema, and that can tell you so much. And I echo everything Stuart says about working on the business side, but sometimes just doing some diagnostic on the platform side can be pretty enlightening and lead you to better questions. And one thing you could do that I do a lot pretty quickly, because you don't have to install anything, and I support a lot of orgs at my university, so I often can't really take a big footprint inside it. But if you use the Toolkit for Salesforce, it's a free Heroku app, you can go and just export out the schema and go through and look at all the custom objects and fields. That can be a really great way to come up with some really great questions quickly. It can be really enlightening on what's been built and what's been added. And then, as Stuart mentioned, taking an inventory of the installed apps can be really enlightening, because sometimes you'll find that some third-party app is at the core of somebody's business, and sometimes can take a pretty big footprint on the org depending on what it is, and that can lead to some really, really great questions. You can also look at the inventory of users and their kind of roles and permissions. That can also be enlightening in terms of trying to figure out who really uses Salesforce and to what extent, and kind of the traces they leave behind can sometimes help you identify those internal advocates and the folks that you might be able to recruit as ambassadors or mentors. Just looking forensically at the org can sometimes lead you to those business side enlightenment moments.
No, that's great input. Thanks, Corey. Yeah, and I would say, right, as you get in there, John, certainly, right, we are a resource for you, whether it's here on the office hours, Twitter, the community, you name it, right? Anything we can help out with. Certainly here to continue to help.
This is CJ. I have just a couple things. I've twice walked into an existing org to rebuild it, and one of the first things that I did is kind of find the primary user or the super users and ask what the goal maybe as you're stepping into it. What's the goal of the org? So maybe before you even get into it and start looking at all the aspects of it, if you can get an overall idea of what's their goal, maybe some of the project ideas, things like that, then that can help you again as you're looking at getting some of those questions when you're talking to the users and stuff like that, but kind of having an overall idea before you start going out there and digging in or getting to the talking to the users and how they use everything, what they like, don't like, and stuff like that. That can just help you as you're kind of making that mental picture on where you want that org to go.
That's awesome. All right. Well, hopefully, John, that gave you a lot of food for thought as you get going. All right. Let's open up the chat here. All right. Just to update there. Nice. Sounds like, Jennifer, you got that working. That's great. One problem fully solved.
Absolutely, it was awesome. I ran the test, it immediately worked, and my name popped in, and it's exactly what it should be. And then all my other fields that I had built based on that started filling in. It was my huge win for the month, I think.
Awesome. Love it. That's what I'm talking about. Nice work, Pete and crew. All right. Who else has a question?
I mean, nobody has a question. I also built out the Flow version. If anyone wants to see it, maybe be useful.
Yeah, why not? I'll stop sharing here. We can take the sharing.
It's always fun to see other people's flows.
Well, this is a really simple one. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I guess the real value in this is understanding how to be able to pass values back and forth between flows and process builders. Because process builders are an extremely powerful tool that are going to take you well beyond what workflow rules give you. And flows are going to take you even closer to what you can do with Apex. It's still not one-to-one, but I got to say the flow builder for a non-Apex guy like me is the most powerful weapon in my arsenal. Be mindful that in the next release, it's getting a full rebuild of the UI, but the functionality is going to be the same. So in order to call a flow from a process builder, the flow first has to be activated. So you create your flow first. So this is I know that what I'm going to want to do, in my case, I don't have drives and contacts. So I'm saying when I populate a text field on my account, so when I've got this text field on account with an ID in it, then I want to connect it to the associated account or to the associated contact. So what I first need to do is say, okay, well, go and get me a contact that has that ID in it. So I needed to create a text variable to store this with. So if I was to do that again, I would just hit V, which is going to bring up create new. I would select variable. I would type in a name for it. And this is the most important part. In order to be able to receive that value from the process builder, I do need to set this to either input only or input output. And what this allows, if it's set to private, that variable can only be used in the context of the flow. If it's set to input, it can receive values from outside, either from Apex or from process builders. And if it's set to output, it can pass those values to Apex or to other flows. So then I just set it and basically said, go get me the contact whose ID is the same as that text value that I pushed in from the process builder. Then I just do a simple update. I say, okay, go get me the account that very similarly, the flow doesn't know what account we're talking about. So the process builder has to say, oh, it's this one. It's the account that called that called this process builder. And we pass that from the process builder to the flow. We do it the exact same way with a variable that is set to input. And then what we do is we say, I want to populate my contact lookup with the ID that came from, whoops, I actually did that wrong. So then I would just, see, I've got the get contact dot ID, and it should be something like that. It's the contact dot ID. So then I would just say, okay, now grab the actual ID, that actual lookup field. So then save as, okay, close, activate, hop over to the process builder. Process builder is much simpler. For this, I only want it to fire when that lookup's actually populated. Otherwise, it's going to fail all the time when I don't have anything in there. And all I'm doing is saying, call that flow, but I want you to populate that starting account with the ID of the account that called the flow or the launched the process builder, and populate that starting contact with the text field that we have when we passed it in. So now let's YOLO and test it. And the expectation is that my contact lookup should populate or it'll break. And it works.
And the crowd goes wild.
Boom. Baby. Love it. All right. Let me share here. All right. Stuart, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but you said that we could speak up if we had something cool that we saw that we wanted to share.
Yeah.
So this week I got to participate in something new that I'll promote. I'm not part of the group that hosted it, but I just participated in it. It's something called Path to Code. It's path2code.com. And it is being hosted by a couple Salesforce MVPs. And they are going through Salesforce development basics. It's 25 weeks course, and it's virtual. And they're going all the way from last week. It was an introduction to Salesforce and just talking about the developer console and such. And next week they're going to talk about loops and conditional statements. And then they go the next 25 weeks, they go all the way through SOCL, REST, SOAP, external services, how to do APIs, how to understand triggers, JavaScript. That's not necessarily a deep dive into any of these items. It's only an hour long. But they do talk about all of these things so that newbies like myself to the development side understand what these topics are, understand what they touch and the ramifications around them. And it's a pretty interesting website. And you can sign up to join these discussions, or they actually also record them. And so you could, if you're not able to attend, you can also view the recordings. And that's my shout out. That's my shout out this week.
Awesome. Can you post what'd you call that? That was Path to Code?
Yeah, path2code.com. And
cool. Nice. Good stuff. All right. Let's see, Justin, you had your hand raised. Go for it.
Hey there, everyone. Just wanted to say, preface, learning a lot here, see a lot more macro perspectives, which is really cool. For me, I have a pretty small org, about 60,000 contacts, and I guess you just blanketly call me a power user in my org. I had a quick question. I was wondering if anyone uses Jupyter, any wrappers, or uses it for any REST calls. I do some simple manipulation in Jupyter Notebook using Python. And I'm wondering, I guess, just kind of streamline my processes when I do the manipulation, whether it's merging tables together or selecting specific information. If there's just cleaner ways to push that back into the CRM. So if anyone has any insight, it could just be resources or feedback on if it's not really advised. Kind of new to it, so I'd really appreciate that.
Well, I'll admit you lost me at Python. I don't know if anybody else can jump in there.
Oh, that's okay if not. I just thought I'd throw it out there. It's not the most integral. It just seems fascinating. It's capable of being used as a querying language, doing some of the groundwork for me when I pass it out. So I'll just keep it in mind. I'll keep looking. But again, anyways, so if anyone has anything, I'd appreciate it. You can throw it in the chat at some point. But if not, keep plugging away. This is really awesome.
Sounds good. Thanks, Justin. Corey, you had your hand raised.
I did. I just wanted to do another shout out. Pete mentioned the new Flow Builder. I did want to mention that right after this hour, there will be Automation Hour. Jen Lee and company have Automation Hour, and they're going to be talking about the new Flow Builder with Shannon Hale, who is the new product manager for Flow Builder at Salesforce.com. So I'm just putting the link to that in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Automation Hour is awesome. Right. Awesome. Thanks, Corey. All right. We have about 20 minutes left. Who has a question?
Since we got Pete on, I do have a question. The difference in Process Builder and Flows. Do you know if there's a difference in the user context on those? The reason I ask is I've got a remote site that calls are coming into, and what I want to have, it fires a platform event, and then it saves a record. And I'm trying to build a process off of that that posts to Chatter. And when I try to do it either from the platform event or from the creation of the new record, it says it won't post to Chatter because the guest user, which initiated the whole thing, doesn't have access to post to Chatter. However, I can create a flow that does it. And so I'm just kind of wondering about the difference in the user context.
Well, I know that in flows you can you can actually push to the created by ID field, but that doesn't actually for any other object, created by ID indicates $user at the time of creation. Whereas with Chatter posts, you got created by ID and inserted by ID. Inserted by ID is the real created by ID. Created by ID is just the name that gets displayed next to it. And the reason that you can write into that on create is for org mergers, so that it doesn't look like the admin who did the migration, posted everything in Chatter. There's, I would have to dig for it, but there are listings for when flows run in when flows and process builders run in either system context or user context. And it doesn't exactly make a whole lot of sense. It's not very intuitive. That said, one way that I've gotten around stuff like this is like simple triggers sometimes. But as far as like switching the context to convince the system that you are a different user than you actually are, that is something that Salesforce does their absolute best to block. And the reason why is because this could be used to exploit license limitations. You could just get a whole bunch of community users that aren't supposed to access stuff and then pay for one full license and then create automation that anybody who does anything is doing it on behalf of that user. So that's why they make it really, really, really hard to jump context. One thing that I would never recommend doing for like a legit implementation is something I call the Salesforce boomerang, where what we do is we basically create an outbound email notification that gets picked up as email to case, and then the subject and the body of that email are used as parameters that we pass into a flow that does the thing that we actually want to do, and then we can do that as a specific user, whoever the case automation user is. I would say this might be one of those cases where you might have to buckle and do a real simple couple line trigger to call a flow that does it. Yeah, switching it over, but why wouldn't that user have access to Chatter is what I'm wondering, because I thought guest users could use Chatter.
Oh, well, so it's not a community guest user. This is coming in from an API. It's just an API call to a remote site that I've created, and that's treated as a guest user.
Yeah, I mean, I've had luck with doing Chatterbot stuff, and I mean, not what they're calling bots now, but I mean like building automatic chatter responders. But the problem is they're always truly running in the context of the logged in user.
Yeah.
There's a blog post, there's a 3-part blog post from Douglas Ayers about basically how to build chatterbots and stuff. It might, and while it's not exactly what you're describing, you might find some insights there. I'll see if I can find the blog and post a link to it.
Okay.
As well as I'll try to find that doc about what does and does not run in system context.
All right, great. Thank you.
Love it. Awesome. All right. Who else wants to jump in with a question? Great turnout today. Say if you, I don't know, I can't remember if we mentioned this on the last call before the break, but just a reminder, you should have received it in your email, that the Winter 19 maintenance is up on Trailhead, and highly recommend getting those knocked out and moving forward.
Yeah, I was impressed with the maintenance exams this time. They actually had hands-on that you had to do. It's not just answering questions.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Any tips anyone wants to share of recent things they've implemented or built on the platform?
I mean, I'm working on Blackjack, but it's not quite done yet.
Nice. Well, love to see that once you get it done.
Yeah, it's mostly there. At this point, the main problem is that it does wonky stuff where if the hand ends on the dealer's turn, the flow crashes, and sometimes it'll tell you busted when you only have 16, or it'll tell you you had blackjack when you've got like 12 or 13 or something. You know, it's most of the time it works. But yeah, I'm storing the card images as static resources, and then I'm using Einstein Analytics to pull in what you've got, and using real-time queries on the Einstein side of it. So it's been a fun build, but I got it about 90% of the way done, and I was just like, I don't want to touch this anymore. But it was much more manageable than when I tried to build the game Risk.
Oh, I bet.
But the random number generator part of it, that's kind of interesting. If anybody wants, you want to see a random number generator with Flow?
Hey, let's do it.
Okay, so when I was at Dreamforce, I was at the MVP cigar party, and I found out that I had recently found out that Brian Kwong does this D&D at Dreamforce event, and I used to play D&D back in the day, and I got really excited about it, and I'm like, oh, why don't you use Salesforce to roll your dice for you? So I whipped this up. I've been experimenting with like random number theory declaratively for a long time. And there's a couple of roadblocks. First, we have in Apex things like crypto.random integer, stuff like that. There's a number of different functions that we have to get random numbers. In Excel, we have rand and rand between. So why am I, as a declarative user, denied the ability to create a random number? And it doesn't come up very often. There's a blog from, I think his name's Andrew Johnson or Jackson, SFDC in Seatown. He's got blog posts on quasi-random number generation going back to like 2012. And I said, well, this is something I can tackle. So like many random number generation functions, what it's doing is it's working off of time as our variable. So I'll actually first just demo it. So, okay, I want to roll, we'll say I want to roll 6-sided dice and I want to roll 5 of them. And boom, these are my outputs, 3, 3, 6, 4, 6. So how does this actually work? Well, what we're doing is first I've got this selection screen. But then let's see, increments. I've got an incrementation variable that basically every time I go through this quasi loop, it adds 1 to it to get the number of random numbers I need. I check and see if my loop variable is at 100 yet, because at 100, I'm going to run out of SOQL queries. And then what I do is, for each time I'm incrementing, I call this one Rabbit Punch the database. I go and query a random account. Find me any account that the ID is not null. And I don't care about this account. All I'm doing is wasting time, specifically 20 to 50 milliseconds. Because basically, if I want to query the database, I have, it's a multi-tenant environment. So I have to kind of step back, get in line at the hard drives, wait for my turn, get my one record, and then I can go back to the flow. But it's a significant enough amount of time that has passed that if I use the now function, the number of milliseconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970 has changed. So then I've got a simple formula over here. And I have this in an unmanaged package if anyone wants to link to it. Let's see. Where's the formula? I haven't touched this guy in a minute. Let's see. Formulas. Here we go. Line break millisecond. So what this does is it says measure the amount of time today minus now is going to give us the number of milliseconds that have passed since midnight. We then multiply that by 864 with a bunch of zeros after it. That's the number of milliseconds in a day, because what it's actually going to return to us is a really long decimal, and we want an integer. Then we grab the rightmost character. So for example, right now it's 251.30.004. We would take that 4. And then each time we pass through the loop, we jam those together. So first I get a 4, then I get a 6, then I get a 5, then I get a whatever. And then we break that into groups of 20 for each of the 5 dice that we're rolling. And then we just use modulus to say, okay, well, I wanted a 20-sided die. So take that 20-digit random number that you created, divide it by 20, tell me what the remainder is, and that's what my dice roll was. And that's how we do that. So then the outputs are just right here. We concatenate them as we go along. All this does is it says, hey, take my random string and add the return of the last milliseconds. So if we actually look at the debugger, we can see as each loop passes, we see that this junk variable, that's the random account that I grabbed, These are my milliseconds so far. Okay, hey, I'm at loop number 9, so we're still not at 100. Go and grab some other random account. Now we've added a 1 to that. Now at the next one, 419, and at the next one, 4196, et cetera, et cetera. Random numbers. What's the only actual business use case that I could find for this? Round robin assignments. You know, we want our cases to get randomly doled out to our different reps. I think in 4 years, I've maybe had clients ask for random numbers twice when it wasn't just curiosity, and we usually just told them no. Yep. So that's my demo. And if anybody wants the link to the unmanaged package, you know, just reach out to me, letsplaysalesforce@gmail.com. I don't want to spam it out there too much, you know, so I'd rather, if you want it, let me know, and I'll give you the link.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Pete. Pranav, go for it.
Hi everyone, this is Pranav. So I have a scenario in my project where what I have to do is basically I have a custom address object which ties up with accounts context. So basically it's account contacts and addresses, and what I want to do is whenever I change anything on account, I want to publish a platform event so that somebody who's subscribing to it can get the notification, and I want to pass in all the details for accounts, contacts, and addresses. So let's say if I have one contact with related if I have one account with 2 contacts and let's say 3 address records, I want to push all this in the platform event object, let's say to someone who is subscribed. Maybe it's a MuleSoft subscriber. So right now what I've done is I have a process which calls out a flow, and what I've done is, since I'm not very well versed with the flows, I have an Apex plugin, and I use that to query all the related records, and then basically serialize it and pass and put the data in the platform event object fields, and then basically publish the event. So basically what I wanted to do is find out if there's a way to kind of replace the Apex plugin with the standard querying of records in the flow itself. And I wanted to know if I know there's a way to bulkify it, but then I just wanted to know the best way to do this. Any inputs from you guys?
Anybody have thoughts there? Yeah, I think it would sound like anybody has any input there. I think that'd be a good one. Pranav, definitely post that out into either the MVP Office Hours group or just on the answers part of the Trailblazer community. If you haven't already, if you have, certainly feel free to post a link to the question into the group and to get additional visibility on it. Awesome. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. Anybody else want to jump in? All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end the call there today. Appreciate everybody joining, all the input. Pete, thanks for showing some cool stuff. And yeah, we'll post the recording as well as the slides out here later today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next call in just a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.